The red warning lights bathed the bridge of the U.S. Relentless in an angry glow as Lieutenant Jake Morrison's fingers flew across his console. The alien transmission crackled through the speakers, filled with static and desperation. Jake had heard distress calls before, but this one made his blood run cold. Commander Emily Brooks stepped closer, her boots clicking against the metal floor. Her face, marked by years of deep space missions, showed no emotion as she listened to the plea for help. The voice belonged to a Valian captain, speaking in broken standard English about engine failures and approaching raiders. "Commander, I've got the location," Jake said, his voice tight. "It's in the death zone." The bridge fell silent. Every crew member knew about the death zone. Ships went in, but they never came out. The region was a nightmare of twisted gravity that could crush a vessel in seconds, radiation storms that cooked electronics, and space anomalies that defied physics. "Ma'am, the Galactic Council has already written them off," reported Tactical Officer David Walsh from his station.
Screen
Showed the official response. "No rescue attempts authorized. The risk was too great. Man says it's too dangerous to even consider." Brooks let out a short laugh that had no humor in it. "Then it's a good thing we're not asking for permission." She turned to the communications officer. "Contact Admiral Lisa Carter. Tell her we're going hunting." "You?" The comm officer's eyes widened. "Ma'am, should I mention the death zone?" She'll figure it out," Brooks replied. Jake watched his commander with growing respect. Most officers would have filed a report and moved on. The death zone had a reputation for a reason. Over 300 ships had been lost there in the past decade alone. But Brooks wasn't most officers. The response from Admiral Carter came faster than expected. "Permission granted," the message read. "Take what you need. Bring them home." Within minutes, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "It's all hands. Prepare for emergency deployment. We have civilians in distress." Jake smiled as he heard the crew's reaction. Instead of fear or complaints, there was excitement in their voices. Humans were strange that way. Tell them something was impossible, and they started planning how to do it anyway. 2 hours later, a small but deadly fleet had assembled near the edge of the death zone. Captain Mike Stevens aboard the destroyer Defiant checked in first. His voice steady over the comm. "Ready to go, Commander?" "My crew's been itching for some real action." Captain Rachel Torres, commanding the Thunderstrike, was next. "All systems green. Medical teams are standing by." The medical frigate Mercy completed their group, loaded with emergency supplies and the best trauma doctors in the fleet. Commander Brooks studied the formation on her tactical display. For ships against the most dangerous region in known space, most species would call it suicide. "You know," Walsh said quietly, "the Galactic Council thinks we're crazy." Brooks nodded. "They probably have a point. The death zone has killed more experienced crews than ours. So why are we doing this?" The commander looked out at the swirling mass of deadly space ahead of them. Other species saw chaos and death. She saw a puzzle to be solved, because those Valians sent out a distress call, and somebody needs to answer it. Besides, we've handled worse. Jake thought about Earth, the planet that had tried to kill humanity for millions of years with ice ages, volcanic eruptions, massive storms, and crushing ocean depths. Every human alive was descended from ancestors who had looked at impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. The death zone might be dangerous, but it wasn't Earth. And if humans could survive their home planet, they could survive anything space. Threw at them. "All ships," Brooks announced over the fleet channel, "we're going in. Time to show the galaxy how humans answer a distress call." The moment the human fleet crossed into the death zone, reality seemed to bend around them. Space itself twisted like water going down a drain, and the stars stretched into impossible shapes. The Relentless shuddered as gravitational forces grabbed at her hull, trying to tear the ship apart. "Hull stress at 40%, reported engineer Paul Chen from the engine room. His voice was calm, almost bored, while within acceptable limits. Commander Brooks nodded. The ships of other species would already be scrap metal by now. Their hulls were designed for the gentle environments of garden worlds, built light and elegant. Human ships were different. They were built like Earth itself had taught them to build. Tough, stubborn, and ready for anything. Navigator Tom Anderson hunched over his console, his weathered hands dancing across the controls. The man had guided ships through asteroid fields and solar flares, but the death zone was something else entirely. Space here didn't follow normal rules. What looked like empty void could suddenly become a crushing gravity well. What appeared solid could turn out to be nothing at all. It's going to be rough, but we can thread. The needle between those gravity shears, the fleet moved deeper into the chaos. Outside the viewports, radiation storms painted the darkness in deadly colors, brilliant purples and greens, that would cook most alien crews in their suits. The human crews watched the light show with casual interest. Radiation levels are spiking, called out Medical Officer Kelly Walsh. Any normal crew would be dead already. But humans weren't normal. Their bodies had been enhanced over generations. Of genetic improvements and medical technology, their suits were lined with materials that could stop cosmic rays. Their blood carried nanobots that repaired damage faster than it could accumulate. What would kill other species was just another day at the office for them. Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, announced sensor specialist Maria Rodriguez. Her screens lit up with massive shapes moving through the void. Void hunters, big ones. The creatures were enormous, each one the size of a battleship. With hide that could deflect energy weapons and tentacles that could crush a frigate, they drifted through the death zone like ancient sea monsters, feeding on the energy storms and hunting anything foolish enough to enter their domain. Most species would have turned and run. The Void Hunters were legendary predators, responsible for dozens of missing ships. Even the Galactic Navy avoided areas where they were known to hunt. Instead of fleeing from the massive space-dwelling predators, Commander Brooks leaned forward. With interest, follow them, she ordered, ma'am. Tom looked confused. Those things eat spaceships for breakfast. Brooks smiled. Where there's prey, there's usually something worth hunting. Think about it. What do Void Hunters eat when there aren't any ships around? Understanding dawned on Tom's face. The creatures weren't just random predators. They were following food sources, tracking the energy signatures of damaged vessels and distress beacons. If something was broadcasting an SOS signal in the death zone, the Void Hunters would eventually find it. The fleet followed the massive creatures at a safe distance. Watching their behavior patterns, the Void Hunters moved with purpose, their tentacles tasting the radiation currents for traces of their prey. They were heading somewhere specific. Smart thinking, Commander, whispered Jake Morrison. Use the local wildlife as hunting dogs. The Void Hunters led them through a maze of gravitational anomalies and radiation fields that would have been impossible to navigate alone. The creatures knew every safe path, every hidden danger in their territory. They were the perfect guides, completely unaware they were leading the human fleet directly to their target. After 3 hours of following the predators, Maria's sensors picked up something new. I've got metal signatures ahead, she reported. Multiple vessels. One of them matches the Valian ship's profile. The Void Hunters had found their prey. Thanks to them, so had the humans. The peaceful dawn drifted through the void like a wounded bird. Her once beautiful hull, designed with flowing curves that reflected Valian art and culture, was now scarred with blast marks and breached sections. Emergency lights flickered weakly. Through torn metal, an atmosphere leaked from multiple holes. Like blood from wounds, surrounding the helpless colony ship were 6 Scarith Raider vessels. Their ships looked like predatory insects, all sharp angles and weapon pods. Built for one purpose, taking what belonged to others. The Raiders had already attached boarding tubes to the Valian ship and through the sensors. The human crew could see armed figures moving through the corridors. Those poor people, whispered Jake Morrison, watching the tactical display. The Valians were a peaceful species, evolved on a world with no dangerous predators. They had never learned to fight, never needed to. Their entire culture was built around harmony and cooperation. Commander Brooks studied the scene with cold calculation. 6 Raider ships against 1 human fleet. Under normal circumstances, it would be a fair fight. But these weren't normal circumstances, and humans didn't fight fair when civilians were in danger. Analysis, Walsh. Brooks requested Tactical Officer David Walsh had been studying the enemy ships for several minutes. His fingers moved across his console, highlighting weak points in weapon systems. Heavy firepower, but all show, he reported. Look at their formation. They're positioned to intimidate, not defend. These crews are used to terrorizing civilians, not fighting real soldiers. The Scarith ships were impressive-looking, covered in spikes and painted with intimidating symbols. But Walsh could see past the theater. Their weapons were designed for destroying defenseless vessels, not military combat. Their armor was thick in the front, but thin on the sides. Most telling of all, they had left their rear flanks completely exposed, weak points identified, Walsh continued. Their engines are unshielded, probably to make them faster for hit-and-run attacks. Take out their power cores and their sitting ducts. Captain Stevens' voice crackled over the come from the defiant commander. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? These aren't warriors, they're bullies who've never faced real opposition. Brooks nodded. The Scarith had built their reputation on attacking the weak. Merchant vessels, colony ships, research stations, targets that couldn't fight back, had probably never encountered a military force that actually wanted to engage them. Permission to demonstrate proper hunting techniques? Stevens asked, his voice carrying a predator's eagerness.
Granted,
Brooks replied.
I want to remember.
We want survivors to spread the word. Can't have other raiders thinking they can operate. In our territory, the human ships began to move with deadly precision. This wasn't random violence. It was calculated warfare perfected over thousands of years of human conflict. Every captain knew their role. Every crew member understood the plan without needing detailed orders. The Relentless and Thunderstrike used the Death Zone's gravitational anomalies as cover, slipping through space distortions that hid them from enemy sensors. The twisted gravity fields that had destroyed countless ships became their allies. Bending sensor readings and masking their approach, Captain Torres positioned her ship behind a radiation storm, the deadly energy masking her vessel's heat signature. The Defiant drifted near a gravitational shear that would tear apart any ship that got too close, but also provided perfect concealment. The Scarith raiders were completely focused on their prey. Their crews were busy dividing up the loot and prisoners they expected to take from the Valian ship. They had done this hundreds of times before. Find a helpless target, overwhelm them with superior numbers, take everything of value they had. Never encountered humans before? No, they didn't know that humans had learned warfare from the deadliest teacher of all, each other. For thousands of years, humans had fought humans, each conflict teaching new lessons in violence and tactics. They had learned to turn every disadvantage into an advantage, every weakness into strength. The death zone that trapped the Valians was just another battlefield to the humans. The radiation that would kill other species was merely cover. Gravity wells that destroyed ships were simply weapons waiting to be used. Death was approaching from the gravitational shadows. The Scarith raiders never saw it coming. The attack began without warning. Captain Stevens fired first, his shots precise and calculated. The Defiant's weapons didn't target the Scarith ships directly. Instead, they struck the space around them, destabilizing the already chaotic gravitational fields. What had been stable pockets of twisted space suddenly became death traps. Contact lost on Raider ships 2 and 5, reported Maria Rodriguez, watching her sensors as 2 Scarith vessels were caught in the sudden gravity well. The Raiders had seconds to scream before their ships were crushed like tin cans in a giant's fist. The remaining 4 Scarith ships tried to scatter, but the humans had anticipated this. Captain Torres emerged from her hiding spot behind the radiation storm, her weapons blazing. But she wasn't shooting to destroy. She was herding like a sheepdog, driving wolves toward a cliff. Beautiful work, Commander Brooks murmured, watching the tactical display. The Scarith ships were being pushed directly into a massive radiation storm that painted space in deadly green light. The energy field would strip hulls bare and cook anyone inside within minutes. 3 more Raider ships disappeared into the storm. Their hulls began to glow and melt as the radiation ate through their armor like acid. Emergency broadcasts filled the comm channels as the raiders realized their ships were dying around them. "That leaves 3, Walsh reported. "They're trying to run, but there was nowhere to go." The human ships had positioned themselves at every exit point, turning the death zone from the Scareth's hunting ground into their prison. The raiders found escape routes blocked by precisely placed human vessels, each one ready to unleash devastating firepower. "This is how you hunt," Brooks said quietly. "You don't chase your prey, you make them come to you." Meanwhile aboard the peaceful Dawn, Marine Sergeant Kevin Brown led his boarding party through the damaged corridors. The Scareth warriors who had been terrorizing the Valians suddenly found themselves facing human Marines in full combat gear. The difference was immediate and shocking. The Scareth were used to fighting civilians, people who would surrender. At the first sign of violence, they relied on fear, intimidation, and overwhelming numbers against helpless targets. Humans were different. They had learned to fight in the worst conditions imaginable. Kevin and his team moved through the ship's damaged sections like they were walking through a park. Zero gravity? They had trained in it since childhood. Hard vacuum? Their suits could handle it for hours. Radiation leaking from the ship's damaged reactor, their enhanced bodies barely noticed. "Contact front," called out Corporal Amanda White, spotting a group of Scareth warriors trying to hold a corridor. The aliens were armed with energy weapons and wore intimidating armor, covered in spikes and threatening symbols, but when the shooting started, the humans quickly realized what they were dealing with. The Scareth weapons were designed for show more than effectiveness. Their armor looked scary, but had weak points everywhere. Most importantly, their tactics were all wrong for fighting real soldiers. "These aren't soldiers," Amanda muttered easily, flanking a group of raiders who had forgotten to watch their sides. "They're bullies who've never met real predators." The Scareth tried their usual fear tactics, roaring challenges, brandishing weapons, making threatening gestures. Against peaceful Valians, these methods had always worked. Sight of armed raiders was usually enough to make civilians surrender immediately. Against humans, intimidation had the opposite effect. Kevin felt his heart rate increase, his focus sharpen. Adrenaline flooded his system, turning him into a more efficient fighting machine. This was what humans had evolved for: combat against dangerous opponents. "They're actually trying to scare us," laughed Private Danny Lee, dodging energy blasts that would have killed most aliens instantly. "Do they not know where we come from? Earth had tried to kill humanity for millions of years with predators, diseases, natural disasters, and climate changes that wiped out entire species. Every human alive was descended from ancestors who had looked death in the face and decided to fight instead of surrender. Within minutes, the battle was over. Most of the Scareth warriors were down, and the few survivors were running for their ships in absolute terror. Their confident roars had turned into panicked screams, as they realized they had encountered something far more dangerous than anything they had ever imagined. The surviving raiders who managed to escape carried a new message across the galaxy's criminal networks: stay away from human space, and pray you never meet the void demons who hunt in the darkness between stars. Captain Vex's forearms shook as he tried to steady himself against the damaged bulkhead of his ship. Villian's large, gentle eyes evolved for seeing in the soft light of his peaceful homeworld, couldn't quite process what he was witnessing. Commander Brooks walked through the peaceful Dawn's corridors like she was inspecting a routine repair job. Not surveying the aftermath of the most impossible rescue in galactic history, the human woman stepped carefully around the debris, boots clanking against twisted metal. She paused to examine a breach in the hull where Scareth weapons had torn through the ship's elegant framework. To Vex High, each scar represented terror and desperation. To Brooks, they were simply damage to be cataloged and repaired. "Took quite a beating," Brooks observed, running her hand along a blast mark. "But the hull integrity is still solid. Valian engineering is impressive. Most ships would have broken apart completely." Vexai's translator device worked frantically to process the casual tone. How could she speak so calmly about their nightmare? His crew had spent hours huddled in the inner chambers, expecting death at any moment. The Scareth had been preparing to sell them all into slavery, separating families and cataloging them like cargo. Commander Vexhai managed to say, his voice still shaking. How did you survive the death zone? Our science says it's impossible. No ship has ever returned from those regions. Brooks shrugged, the gesture completely human and utterly alien to the Valian mind. We merely responded to a distress signal, standard rescue protocol. The translator device made several confused beeping sounds before finally rendering her words. Standard protocol? Vexai's mind reeled. In the death zone, against Scarith raiders, species had detailed records of every attempt to cross those regions. All had ended in destruction and death. But the gravitational anomalies... Vexai began. Tricky navigation, Brooks agreed. Our pilot Tom has dealt with worse during Earth's polar storm seasons. The radiation levels were elevated, but nothing our medical systems couldn't handle. The Valian captain stared at her. Elevated radiation levels. The energy storms that had surrounded them would have killed his entire crew in minutes, even with their best protective suits. Yet this human spoke of them like mild inconvenience. Medical Officer Kelly Walsh approached, carrying a tablet with casualty reports. Commander, final numbers are in. We've got 47 Valians with minor injuries, mostly from the initial attack. No fatalities. Their medical needs are pretty basic. Mostly just trauma counseling. Good work, Kelly. Sure they're comfortable for the trip home? Vexai watched the exchange with growing amazement. The humans treated their impossible rescue like routine paperwork. No celebration, no boasting about their incredible achievement. They simply moved on to the next task with casual efficiency. 3 weeks later, the scene in the Galactic Council chambers was very different. Vexai stood before the assembled representatives of dozens of species, his voice stronger now but filled with awe as he recounted the rescue. The council members listened. With expressions ranging from disbelief to outright shock, the humans turned the death zone into their weapon, Vexai testified. They used the very forces that trap and kill our ships as tools for hunting. They moved through radiation storms like they were gentle breezes. They commanded gravity itself. To destroy their enemies, the Altarian representative leaned forward, her crystalline features reflecting confusion. You're saying they voluntarily entered the death zone? To rescue strangers? It's not only entered it, Vexai replied, but they mastered it. They fought the Scarith raiders in conditions that should have killed everyone involved, and they won. Carter's official report arrived the same day, transmitted from Earth with typical human understatement. The document was dry, professional, and completely failed to capture the magnitude of what had been accomplished. Mission successful, it read. Civilian vessel recovered. Hostile forces neutralized. Recommend expansion of rapid response capabilities. But across the galaxy's criminal networks, a very different message was spreading. Surviving Scarith raiders, their minds broken by terror, whispered warnings in dark ports and hidden bases. They spoke of void demons who hunted in the spaces between stars, of Deathworld monsters who turned the universe's most dangerous regions into their playground. The stories spread like wildfire through the underworld. Pirates who had never shown fear before began avoiding entire sectors of space. Slave traders canceled raids rather than risk encountering human ships. The name human became a curse word in dozens of criminal languages within 6 months. The Human Rapid Response Fleet was officially established. On paper, it was a humanitarian organization dedicated to rescue operations in hazardous regions. The bureaucrats filed their reports, the politicians made their speeches, and the media celebrated humanity's commitment to galactic peace. But in the dark corners of space, where predators gathered and violence ruled, they knew the truth. The humans hadn't formed a rescue fleet. They had created a hunting pack, and now they prowled the most dangerous regions of the galaxy, turning hunters into prey and making the impossible look routine. The galaxy's criminals learned to fear a new sound, the approach of human ships in the darkness, coming to answer every call for help with overwhelming force and deadly precision.